Hi, and thanks for joining me. I'm TJ Walker. This is Filtered, and today I'm taking the day off. But I still wanted to share with you some interesting things I think would be helpful. You may have missed some of these stories in the last week. So, what you'll see in here right now are some of our most popular stories in the last week that are an important part of the news. Enjoy. The Clintons are back in the news and they are refusing to testify in front of Congress regarding Epstein. Now, I heard this and my immediate reaction is, uh-oh. Maybe they have something to hide. What's going on here? Because certainly there's been a lot of news coverage about Bill Clinton's association with Epstein over the years, and Epstein allegedly went to the White House 17 times when President Clinton was in power. Is he hiding something? So my gut reaction always is to look at the story, regardless of party. Someone who's a pure Democratic hack, for example, would say, oh, something possibly negative about Clinton. I'm not even going to read the story, not even going to look at it. That's not my perspective. I'm here as a sane, sensible centrist. So I want to play it to you straight. So I decided to look into this and do a little more research. Here's what I found. So again, the facts are that Bill and Hillary have been ordered to testify, to give live testimony before the House Oversight Committee in its Epstein inquiry. The chairman is Republican James Comer, and he's threatening them with contempt of Congress charges. The way that works is he would then send it to the Department of Justice, and then they could, in theory, put the Clintons in prison for a year. Doesn't happen very often, but that's at least the potential. Now, here's what the Clintons are saying. And there's some nuance here. There's some complexity. So if you're one of these people who just says, okay, anything with the Clintons, I don't even need to hear anymore. Guilty. You don't need to watch any more of this. If you're someone with an open mind saying, what's really going on here, then please bear with me. Now, the Clintons argue that the subpoenas are legally invalid because they lack legislative purpose and are designed to publicly humiliate and potentially entrap them. Again, you could say, if you don't know much about this, you could say, well, just say the truth and no one can entrap you and no one can embarrass you. Only you can embarrass yourself. That's kind of the knee-jerk reaction, but listen in. There is more here. They've already provided sworn written statements to a gazillion questions about this, and they've already notified Congress they will answer more questions. They would like to do it in writing. So in fact, they are not hiding anything. They're asking for the same accommodation that Congressman Comer granted to other witnesses. Their claim, and I have to say it has a lot of credibility, is Comer wants Clinton to help Trump. Comer's going out of his way to say, I don't want to see anything related to Donald Trump. Never mind this fact that Trump and Epstein are everywhere, that they seem locked at the hip like that they were best friends. I don't want to see any of that. I only want to somehow investigate and make Democrats look bad. And again, to be fair, Epstein had a lot of associations with Democrats. Yes, he did know Bill Clinton. And yes, he had very high-level associations with Alan Dershowitz, who certainly back then was seen as a leading Democratic spokesperson and attorney. Not to mention Lawrence Summers, the former president of Harvard University, who was really caught in kind of a slimy way, not an illegal way, but a slimy way, asking for bro dating advice from Jeffrey Epstein long after it was obvious to the whole world that he was a guilty sex felon. Okay, so back to the Clintons. As far as anyone knows, as far as evidence, the last interaction Bill Clinton ever had with Jeffrey Epstein was in the early 2000s. So he broke off long time ago, more than 20 years ago. There's really no evidence that there was any connection after about 2003, 2004. There's never been any criminal accusations. Now, it is true, Donald Trump has publicly said numerous times that Clinton went to Epstein Island. Only problem is, not true, zero evidence. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to the Clintons. Listen to Donald Trump's own chief of staff, Susie Wiles, who says, Trump keeps saying this. It's not true. There's no evidence Clinton ever went to Epstein Island. So here's what's really going on. And I didn't understand this initially. So the reason really high-profile figures like to do this testimony through a written process is it's very easy for a member of Congress playing for all the cameras to put some document in front of you. It could be made up and then ask you in front of all the cameras, well, what is this? How do you respond to this? And it's very easy for there to be sound bites of saying, well, I don't know, I don't remember, or, this looks bad, but I don't. There's all sorts of ways you can easily make a fool out of anybody. It could happen to you. It could happen to me if someone decides in advance they want to interrogate you live in front of Congress with cameras on. Now, I'm not suggesting people should never be asked to do that. I think it's good when all the tech leaders or all the tobacco leaders are occasionally asked to testify in front of Congress. But what's going on here is different. This is a clear-cut example of a Republican member of Congress doing the bidding of President Trump, trying to take the heat off of Trump, because if there are some tenuous connections between Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein, there's 10,000 more connections of very, very strong interlocking nature between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. And Representative James Comer, the Republican in charge of this investigation in Congress, doesn't seem to have any interest in it whatsoever. It's only Democrats he's interested in investigating. So Clintons have lawyered up, as they should, and they are making the case that all the other people who have had similar contact with Epstein, i.e. really none in the last 20 years, have been allowed to give their testimony through sworn written testimony. All they're asking for is exactly the same opportunity, the same level of respect. Of course, if you're a member of Congress in the Republican Party, nothing's going to get you a primary campaign faster or a well-funded opponent or a nasty tweet than showing respect to a Clinton. According to the Associated Press, an ICE official shot and killed a 37-year-old woman in Minneapolis, in a Minneapolis neighborhood. Renee Nicole Macklin Good was shot and killed. I'm going to show you the footage here. If you have small children, you may want to remove them from the room. You can decide for yourself. Now, a lot of people are looking at this video and they are drawing different conclusions. Let's take a look now, and you can judge for yourself exactly what you think happened here. Okay, so we have the ICE officials pulling up. The woman is backing up. Now, the interpretation of some is this woman was trying to get away. She was not, in fact, trying to harm or kill the ICE official. The interpretation of the ICE officials is she was trying to kill them by running them over. It certainly didn't look that way to me, but this is one of those things where you sit often determines where you stand. So let's look at some more facts of the case. Now, I'm not saying this should be a factor in public opinion, but I do think it's interesting that the woman is a blonde, white, American woman mother who, in the headshots I've seen, appears to be an attractive white woman. We're not used to seeing ICE officials or officials of the federal government killing middle-class, middle-aged white women. That's something that's unusual. I'm not in any way suggesting that her life has higher moral value than, say, a poor black man. But based on how racial politics flare up in America, it may, in fact, have a real difference in how this whole thing plays out in public opinion. Now, Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, as you would expect, is very adamant that she said, quote, "Our officer followed his trainings, did exactly what he's been taught to do." Again, it just seems a bit odd that someone is backing up a car, not on your foot, trying to move, to then shoot them and kill them. Just seems a bit extreme. And maybe not everything is like it is in the TV shows, but whatever happened to shooting out their tires, giving a warning shot, anything like that. But no, this was a shooting. Now, according to the Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frey, he says this is bull, and he uses some other word I won't use here, having seen the video myself. Now, if you're following American politics very closely, there's a lot of controversy about the use of federal officials, ICE officials, going in and removing people. Sometimes they've been here for 45 years, active, beloved members of their community, forcibly removing them, throwing them in jail, sometimes throwing them out of the country. There's a lot of controversy about how officials have essentially taken over certain American cities, not ones with Republican mayors, but certain cities are taken over, and essentially Americans feel under siege by their own government. That's something that's never happened before in the United States, and it's a daily occurrence now. It's gotten to the point where it doesn't really generate much news. This is a little bit different. It was all captured on video, and many, I won't say most, I can't prove most, but many Americans look at this and think, okay, this was cold-blooded murder. In fact, the audio, which I did not share from you, has a passerby, an observer saying, essentially, stop, you murdered this person. Why are you murdering? You're criminals. This was sort of the initial gut reaction of someone who had a much better view than you did or I did. They were there on the ground, presumably holding their cell phone, and they're incredulous about this. So again, the official narrative is that this person was being violent, threatening the ICE official. The video sure doesn't look like that. Now, I don't know what happened before that. You can pull any one bit of video out selectively to manipulate people's perceptions. We've seen that before in other cases. But this isn't supposed to be the way America works. Liberal democracies, which the United States used to be, is supposed to have the principle of proportional use of force. Until recently, it just would not have occurred to most police officers or officials of any kind of law enforcement to see a middle-aged woman, mother, calmly, slowly backing up, slowly proceeding forward, not stopping, and then just to shoot them dead. That just wouldn't have been kind of the normal thought process. And now apparently it is. Now, there are a lot of constitutional issues here. Some are saying, well, can the city of Minneapolis try this officer for murder? I think that's going to be a tough sell. Regardless of whether you think the person did commit murder, it's going to be very hard because of the jurisdiction issues. Typically, the federal government laws supersede local laws. But this strikes a lot of people as bizarre. Now, we are already in a situation where President Trump's approval ratings have gone from high 40s to mid 40s to low 40s to, according to some polls, 35, which by many accounts is the lowest any modern president has ever had in terms of approval ratings. Will something like this further erode trust? We will see. But this is an area that's already traumatized. Now, this is George Floyd territory, if you remember that situation. And yes, federal officials typically have immunity, as I'm sure the Department of Homeland Security will claim for this officer. But this just is not set right to a lot of people. It's one thing to be all in favor of law and order when the people don't look like you or they seem really poor. I mean, this just looks like a middle-class mom who has a kid. Apparently she was going home to her kid. She's not coming home, ever. She was, depending on your point of view, executed flat out, or she was someone involved in a crime and got caught up and it didn't end well. So something tells me we're going to see this footage a lot. We're going to see this woman seen, again, it's Renee Nicole Macklin is her name. You're going to see pictures of her everywhere. She's going to be a symbol, I think, to a lot of Americans who believe in law and order, Americans who want safety in their community, Americans who normally stand up for the police, who stand up for law enforcement, who are going to say, this is going too far. ICE must be stopped. Hey, that's it for the show today. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm TJ Walker. This is Filtered. I hope you've gotten a lot out of it. If you haven't yet left a review for this show, please do so, regardless on what platform you're on, especially if you are listening on any podcast platforms. We're relatively new on the podcasting platform arena, just 5 months in, and really hoping you get a lot out of it and tell others. So leave a review. Be sure to subscribe and follow on any podcasting platform. If you're watching on YouTube or any other social media platform, then please take a moment to like the video. Leave a comment. I read every comment. Share the video. Sign up for notifications and subscribe. Thanks so much. See you tomorrow. Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, has passed away at age 68. He passed away earlier this week. He had a long battle with metastatic prostate cancer, according to the Associated Press. Now, Dilbert is an extraordinarily beloved, or at least was beloved, cartoon character. At its peak, it was seen in about 2,000 newspapers in 70 countries around the world. It's translated into 25 nations or 25 languages. In 1997, Adams won the Reuben Award, the cartoonist highest honor. And the same year, Dilbert became the first fictional character to make Time magazine's list of the most influential Americans. So he was kind of a big deal. And frankly, he was funny. Back when I read the funny papers, he is someone I read every single day. That's been a while, but it was a huge, huge success. Why am I talking about him? Now, later, in the last few years in his life, he kind of tarnished his reputation. He said some things that arguably were wildly racist. Okay, that's not the point of why I want to talk about him today, and I don't mean to sugarcoat it or discount that. Why I'm interested in talking about Scott Adams is I think he's a fantastic role model for living the creative life in many, many regards. He was a mid-level manager at a company, frustrated, started drawing. Now, he'd wanted to be a cartoonist as a small child, but never really pursued it. By his own admission, he's not the funniest guy in the world, not good enough to be a professional stand-up comedian. He's not the best artist in the world. His art wouldn't really make him a living if he were just a full-time professional fine artist. And he's not the biggest business genius. He's not a Steve Jobs or whatever. But what he did is he combined them. And he's been very honest and forthright about that in admitting. He said, I'm not really a great artist. I'm not the funniest guy, but I'm pretty good at this. I'm pretty good at this. I'm pretty good at this. And I blended them together. And he turned it into a wildly successful creative career. He didn't have to work at the big corporation any longer. He didn't have to sit in endless meetings and suffer the things that the Dilbert character had to suffer, because he saw his opportunity and he combined his strengths in a unique way. That's something I think most people don't do enough, or they don't think to do it again. So often there's the sense of, well, if I had LeBron James' talent, if I were 6'8" and could jump 5 feet in the air, well, of course I could be exceptional in the world, but I don't have any one unique talent that is so astronomically off the charts, 0.0001%, the way LeBron James does or Tiger Woods. Therefore, I have to be content with a boring job and a boring career and a boring life. Scott Dilbert showed there is, in fact, another way. And for that, I congratulate. And by the way, he made, I don't have a total dollar value on it, but tens and tens of millions of dollars. I mean, he made big coin with his art. You know, when you're syndicated in 2,000 papers and all the book deals he got and speaking gigs and other things, he made a very, very nice living. He became wealthy. Let's not kid ourselves. Let's not sugarcoat. It's not a nice living. He became wealthy as a creator. Now, we live in a world now where everyone wants to be a TikTok star or a TikTok or YouTube star. Okay, but this guy was doing it in the 1980s. He did it without social media. So that deserves a special commendation, I think. Again, I don't mean to sugarcoat some of the racist, inflammatory, sexist things he said. He is an interesting case because he identified 4 or 5 years ago as a big liberal, but he really went out of his way to praise President Trump as a communicator, which I have done that as well, praise certain aspects of Trump's communication. That's not unusual. But then he started saying things that just struck a lot of people as bizarrely racist. And I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially, white people shouldn't associate with black people because black people are racist. Things that made people think, this guy's gone off the deep end. Again, not the real lesson I want you to take away from here. The whole point of Filtered with TJ Walker is we look at top news stories, filter them through the lens of communication skills and personal development skills to figure out how you can be more successful. And the other thing that fascinates me about him is he kept his job for a number of years, even after he started doing a daily cartoon and got picked up by syndication. He didn't just say, well, I'm doing this all or nothing and jump off a cliff. No, he was willing to work hard enough to keep the day job in the boring corporate world where he got a lot of material for his cartoons. And then he waited till he had some level of prosperity and financial cushion before he said, all right, I'm doing this full time. Gary Vaynerchuk, the social media guru, talks about that a lot. But still, we live in a culture where it's all about you got to be 18, you got to work 20 hours a day and eat ramen noodles to follow your dream. Otherwise, you have to be a boring stooge working full time in a boring job, and you have to be one or the other. No, you don't. You can pursue your dream right now. In many ways, he reminds me of someone like Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart, by her own admission, is not the world's best chef. She's not the world's best decorator. She's not the world's best gardener. She's not the world's best looking person. But you look at her skills in all of those areas. She combined them together to create something unique. She did become arguably the best in the world at creating a lifestyle that people want, a lifestyle that people aspire to. So she really did become world-class at creating the aspirational lifestyle. Someone beautiful, great cook, great home, great decoration, great garden, having it all. That's what I think many people need to think more about, which is not what's the one thing I'm best at, but what are the areas where I'm very good, not world-class, very good, and can I combine maybe two of those, maybe three of those? I hope I don't seem too immodest, but I think that's essentially what I've done. I'm not the world's best public speaker. I'm not the world's best media news anchor, but I do have 12 million student enrollments for my public speaking courses, my online public speaking courses, media training courses, and personal development courses, because I am a good speaker, I'm a good trainer, and I'm good at starting things earlier and suffering pain and no income for years and years and years. Put those three things together, that's what's made me successful, because I started my first online training course in 1998, lost money for 15 years. Took a long time, but when it paid off, it paid off very nicely. So that's what I want you to think about. What is it that you're good at in a couple of areas? And then how can you blend it together in something new? When Scott Adams started this, there was Garfield the cat, but there wasn't really any cartoon that was animal-based but really looked at The Office. Now, we think of a really popular show like The Office and think of it, that was on a long time ago. Well, Scott Adams was on creating a long time before The Office was around. So finding humor in The Office became his unique way of blending his talents together. And I want to commend him for that. So let's look at some more things he said. As I mentioned, he said himself, I'm not the best at drawing, I'm not the best at humor, but the combination worked. His editor at United Media, the Syndicate, said, I looked first for humor and only secondarily for art. So he wasn't picked for this syndicated column because it was the best drawn art, but because it was funny. And again, this was before blogging. I mean, he started in the 1980s, so he really was a true survivor, and he has passed away. So we don't have to, if he wasn't your best friend and you weren't in favor of his later racist sentiments, I'm not asking you to mourn the loss, but I am asking you to learn from it. I think we can all learn from someone like this who not a LeBron James 0.0001% talent, but someone who had a couple of skills, blended them together, and made a great career out of it. The Virginia legislature has passed a law, and the law is now going into effect, that is banning kids from using social media for more than 1 hour per day. So this is interesting at many levels. I don't think it completely solves the problem, but it's at least a start. This begins January 1st, so just a week and a half ago. The social media platforms had to verify the age of users, and it automatically is supposed to limit, after 1 hour, anyone under 16. If they're on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, X, all of it. This isn't about parental control. This is about a mandate. This is about big government. And guess what? There is pretty strong agreement across the ideological spectrum. Now, liberals and Democrats, centrists, have been in favor of something like this for a while. But Governor Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, also favors this. He supported it. Because there's growing consensus in America across the ideological spectrum that there's just something nefarious going on about big tech capturing the minds of young people, turning kids into zombies. I see it myself where kids show up at the bus stop where my daughter goes. Nobody talks to each other. Everybody's all slumped down, head scrunched up, horrible posture. Nobody's talking to each other because they're staring at social media the whole time. Is this going to stop that at bus stop? I don't know, but at least it's a start. At least it's a start. Now, I should point out that Net Choice is a trade organization run by big tech. They represent Google, Meta, Snap. They say the law is unconstitutional and violates minors' First Amendment rights. We'll see about that. Look, our society has always put some restrictions based on age. You're having your right to smoke cigarettes and kill yourself abridged if you're 15 and you want to smoke cigarettes. That's not legal either. You don't have the right to drink alcohol at 16 or 15 either. So we as a society have already decided not everyone is the same. There should, in fact, be restrictions for people who are at their most vulnerable, which are the children. So I think this is a great first start. Now, before we get all excited about, well, this cures the problem. No more problem with kids on social media. It's limiting it to 1 hour per platform per day. So in theory, a kid could come home from school, spend an hour on TikTok, an hour on Snapchat, an hour on and on until midnight. But in theory, if they are addicted to just one platform, let's say TikTok, the hour runs up, then maybe we increase the odds they actually talk to their brother or sister or go outside and play. Heaven forbid that happens among kids today. So I'm hoping that this is a start. But a word out to you parents there. I would highly urge you, don't rely on government or big tech to protect your kids. Big tech is about making big money. Mark Zuckerberg, the other tech titans, are not buying entire groups of islands in Hawaii because they get up first thing in the morning thinking about, how do I protect little Timmy or little Susie or little Sanjay? How do I make them mentally healthier? That's not what any of these tech titans are thinking about. They're thinking about, first and foremost, how do I enhance shareholder value? How do I grow revenue? How do I make myself richer? And whatever concern there is for protecting the mental health of your children, it's going to be way, way down at the bottom of the list. So I'm happy to see that this cross-partisan boundaries, as I mentioned, Glenn Youngkin, the Republican governor, many of whom thought he might be a good presidential candidate last time, he's endorsed this. According to him, he says social media is causing a mental health crisis. Now, this is a theory that really became popularized in the last few years by NYU psychologist and professor Jonathan Haidt and his book, The Anxious Generation. If you haven't read it, I would highly, highly recommend it and urge you to do so. So what this law does essentially is the responsibility to make sure children are not spending too long on social media will lie with the companies rather than with just the parents. But this is a big but. If your child is a precocious in any way, savvy in any way, tech savvy, which let's face it, a lot of kids, how hard is it going to be for them to create another account and start that with a fresh hour? So they go to hour 2 with TikTok, or grab a parent's phone or an older brother's or older sister's phone, or maybe there's a tablet sitting around the house. So I think it's going to take a lot more diligence than just one law saying, well, the social media companies are supposed to verify it. I have not yet seen how they're verifying this. I mean, there's all sorts of different types of verification. Now, when I'm asked to verify my age, I upload my passport or my driver's license. Well, a 14-year-old doesn't have that. So how is this going to be done, given that 14-year-olds don't really have strong identification? Is it going to be on the honor system? Well, good luck finding a vast, vast swath of teenagers and children in America who are going to be honorable when it comes to their word on whether they're old enough to go on social media. Because I guarantee you, every kid in America thinks they're old enough and responsible enough and mature enough to go on social media if they want it. I understand there are a few who say, I don't want this stuff. I want to be a kid. Unfortunately, that is increasingly a minority viewpoint among kids. Jerome Powell is being targeted by the President of the United States, Powell being the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and he's not being a good boy, according to Donald Trump. And so Trump does what he now does with anyone, whether you're a foreign leader or a domestic adversary. He just alleges you're corrupt, a criminal, that he's investigating, and he's going to essentially take you out. That's the implication. Well, Jerome Powell is fighting back, and he is striking a lot of commentators as sort of a picture of rectitude in Washington, D.C., that rare political figure willing to actually risk reputation, risk the wrath of Trump, and stand up for traditional American values, standing up for the independence of the Fed, standing up for essentially the entire framework of the modern worldwide economy. Now, Jason Furman is someone who weighed in on this with a major op-ed piece in the New York Times. He's former chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors back in the 2013 to 17 range. He was President Obama's chief economist, so you can discount him. If anyone who's ever dealt with Obama makes someone illegitimate, you can discount him. But he really hit hard on what's going on with this Trump administration, trying to reduce Powell. But he's not the only one. There's now sort of a bipartisan, barely, but a bipartisan consensus that what Trump is trying to do is going too far. Senator Thom Tillis, the Republican of North Carolina, has said he is not going to vote for anyone to be a new chair of the Fed if this whole basically fake witch hunt doesn't go away. Let's not forget, Chairman Powell's term is supposed to expire in a few months anyway. I mean, his term ends in May. But Trump's new mantra in Washington is, you do everything I want when I want. If I say jump now, you don't wait 2 seconds to jump, you jump right now. So waiting his turn, because it will be President Trump's turn to pick a chair of the Federal Reserve in May of this year, 2026. That will be his time to fire this guy, not necessarily fire, to pick his new guy, and to get rid of Powell, because my God, what fool, what imbecile, what crazy person actually picked Powell to be chairman of the Federal Reserve? That person must have been crazy, right? Well, guess what? The person who selected Jerome Powell to be the head of the Federal Reserve was, of course, Donald Trump during his first term. But this is striking a nerve with a lot of people. Now, it is true, markets didn't instantly plummet to send a negative message. There was a lot of sort of shrugging, but other people are weighing in. Many central bankers essentially endorsed this following message: we stand in full solidarity with the Federal Reserve System. So you're seeing in Great Britain, you're seeing in Europe, other heads of comparable positions or Fed say, oh, we're with Chairman Powell on this. You're seeing a few other Republican voices in the Senate. They're not attacking Trump directly, but they're saying essentially, hold on here. We're not sure we're really in favor of this. And I do give credit to Thom Tillis. Now, Thom Tillis, you may say, well, gosh, he's courageous. I wonder why. It's because he's not running for re-election. Thom Tillis spoke out once too often against Trump in the past and was so bloodied and bullied and badgered and threatened with primary opposition and funding. He finally said, what do I need this for? So Thom Tillis is not running for re-election. So he has a lot more freedom than most Republicans who presumably are running for re-election. But here's the other thing he said. If there were any remaining doubt, he was referring to the idea that Trump just makes up criminal charges against people he doesn't like and is trying to manipulate the Fed for political reasons. There should now be none. So again, this is a Republican, a conservative. You might not love Thom Tillis, but if you're intellectually honest, you can't say he's a part of the radical left. He's not a part of an extremist terrorist organization. He's not AOC's best friend. He's a conservative Republican from North Carolina, my home state, where I lived most of my formative years from age 5 to 22. And I can tell you, that's not a state full of firebrand liberals, okay? So when Thom Tillis is saying the president of the United States is playing politics with the Federal Reserve, it's time for a lot more people to take this seriously. Thomas Friedman of the New York Times also weighed in on this and basically calling this an unmitigated disaster if this happens. Because we really are seeing the crumblings of the very foundations of not just democracy, but capitalism. A part of what capitalism needs is an independent Fed. Otherwise, if you let a politician do what's in their best interest, they're always going to pick the short-term interest. Donald Trump, in case you hadn't noticed, is somebody who does think about what's in his own best short-term interest. And right now, he's worried about the Democrats winning the 2026 elections, specifically the House, but it's possible they even win the Senate. He's worried about being impeached, rightfully so, if you routinely, some would argue daily, commit impeachable offenses. So he's concerned about that. So he wants to do everything he can to create a favorable economic climate so that voters are happy with his tenure. So in Donald Trump's mind, if we could all of a sudden reduce interest rates by, let's say, half, and everyone can get a cheap mortgage and everyone can buy a car, short term, the economy might really take off between now and, say, Election Day. Long term, that could create massive inflation. And what Chairman Powell did say Sunday night in the video he released to the world was he's going to continue focused on his dual mandate. The dual mandate of the Federal Reserve is to try to keep inflation low at about 2% and to try to keep unemployment low at about 4%. They have to focus on both. The job of the Federal Reserve is not to make the president of the United States look good. And there's often been tensions between Fed chairs and presidents, and some, like Nixon, try to get their fingers on things. But this is the first time we've seen something this downright thuggish toward a chairman of the Federal Reserve, where a president just says, I want you to lower interest rates. Oh, and if you don't, I'm just going to order my Department of Justice to claim that you're a criminal and to start harassing you, indict you, try you, perhaps put you in prison. That has never in the history of this country happened before. And it is happening right now. And it is a massive, massive problem. It's certainly a massive problem if you're a Democrat, a centrist, a liberal, because all of those people want a strong economy. But it's an even bigger problem if you consider yourself a conservative or even a libertarian. The last thing you want is to give politicians thinking about only themselves power to completely destroy the whole economy. And that's not my opinion. That is the opinion of serious economists from across the political spectrum. If you doubt me, look at Argentina. Look at Turkey. Look at countries where their political leaders said, we know better than our central bankers. So we're going to get rid of the ones we have and put in ones who will do what we want short term. Short term, and I mean like 5 minutes, it can work. But in long term, in some of those countries I mentioned, they're seeing 300% inflation. Now, if you remember just a few short years ago, when we had 9% inflation, people were pulling their hair out, lighting their hair on fire, saying it's the end of the world, saying it's economic Armageddon. Well, imagine how you'd feel with 300% inflation. Do we know that's what we're going to get if Powell is removed from office and Trump puts in his own henchmen, willing to simply take orders from the White House? No, but if you look at evidence and what's going on in the rest of the world, that things like that are the logical result of giving the levers of the money of the Fed Reserve to a president who's only thinking about what's in his own short-term interest.